Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss situation in Ukraine on the 20th of May. Do you know how the Russians called the bridgehead near the town of Popasna? They came up with a special name for this place. They call it a flower. The flower of Popasna. And they say that the Popasna flower has bloomed. This is Popasna. And you can see the version of this bridgehead according to the West Sources map. As you see, the situation is really bad for the Ukrainians. Yesterday we saw just a small area around the town. And this morning came today with very bad news for the Ukrainians. The Russians, they're attacking on every single side of this bridgehead. The Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation this morning announced that in a few days the Russians are going to finish liberation of the territory of Lugansk People Republic. These gray dots from the north near Bilogorovka, it's on the west of Severodonetsk-Lysychansk agglomeration, these gray dots, this is the border. This is the border. This is the west border of Lugansk People Republic. And I repeat myself, the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation Shoigu announced today that in a few days, in a few weeks, they're going to liberate this territory and to push Ukrainians from these lands. Now let's back to the Popasna bridgehead. It's not just a bridgehead, it's a knife that heading towards the Ukrainian heart. According to the West sources, the Russians established control over entire this territory. According to the West sources. According to the Russian sources, if we take a look at the Russian map, you're going to see that situation is much worse than we can see on the West sources map. So let's update this map according to the Russian sources for better understanding of the situation. First of all, the Russians established control over the half of Kamyshwaha. I'm not over the half of Kamyshwaha, over the half of the west part of Kamyshwaha. Also, the Russians established control over the town Viktorovka. So we can say that these lands is under the Russian control. First of all, the Russians, we discussed it many times in the previous video, attacked from Popasna towards Kamyshwaha. This was their plan. But they faced a very big defense in this area from Ukrainian side. This is the forest, this is the railway station, and the Russians couldn't take entire control over entire of this town. And their main idea to move towards Vrubivka, because Vrubivka is the railway center. If you control Vrubivka, that means that you control almost the entire support and supply in this area. So that's why, as soon as Russians established control over the west part of Kamyshwaha, they moved to the northwest towards Viktorovka, and they established control over this town yesterday in the evening. Yesterday, the Russians attacked town Tripoli from Popasna, and they established control over the town Tripoli. The same thing, they faced very big defense in this area, but this is the place This is the place, Tripoli of Volodymyrovka, where we could saw the famous Russian VDV operation. The Russians attacked Tripoli on the ground. Meanwhile, they sent their paratroopers toward Volodymyrovka. So it was VDV operation, paratroopers operation, and meanwhile the Russians attacked Tripoli, where the main Ukrainian forces were located. The Russians, their paratroopers, established control over Volodymyrovka. They cut the forces in Tripoli from the big land, and this action ruined the Ukrainian defense in this area. More than that, the Russians established control over Volodymyrovka and over a small village, Novokamyanka. So let's mark and update our map according to this news. Another important update on the south of this area. As you know, there are another ball cauldron we might see in the future. We discussed this town in the previous videos, Svetlodarsk. And we discussed that a few days ago the Russians established control over entire town Novozvanivka. More news we got this morning about this territory. The Russian sources map told us that the Russian forces pushed towards Trinity, it's the town on the south from Popasna, and that they established control over the suburbs of this town, of this small village. So the Russians moved from Novozvanivka towards Troitsky, it's a town called Troitsky, and established control over the north part of this town. Not just the north part, they managed to capture some positions in this area, and now they're trying to move towards the heart of this area, towards Svetogorsk. And the main idea to clean this territory and to create another cauldron in this area. So this is the Russians' Popasna flower, as they call it. And I must say that the situation is very critical. You see that less than 1 or 2 days, they established control over the territory. If we take a look from Novokamyanka, Viktorovka, and Troitsky, they established control more than like a half, 1/3 of this area, 1/3 of entire Lysychansk agglomeration. They're moving very fast. And as you know, today Zelensky announced about the important meeting between the military bloc, military part of his power, and himself to decide what are they going to do next. What are they going to do with the Lysychansk agglomeration? Meanwhile, the Russians are attacking Sirotiny, and as far as I know, they have established control over some suburbs of this town. They're prepared, they made a wedge in this area, and as we discussed before, they're trying to split this territory in 2 parts. The same thing we can say about Severodonetsk. The Russian sources told us that the Russians established control over some suburbs, over some towns in the suburbs of this area. No news from Bilogorovka, and as you see, let's come back to Popasna one more time. As you see, the Russians are moving towards these 2 roads. Yesterday we discussed about the neck of the battle, about the bottleneck, and we can say that the Russians has already established fire control over the regular road. For now on, there is no way, it's just 5 kilometers, as you see. So we can say that from now on there is no way to support this area using this road, this regular road. The only one way the Ukrainians can support this territory using the railroad and some very low quality roads that leads toward Siversk, and after Siversk leads toward Lysychansk agglomeration. Another important thing that the Russians are moving from this area towards Vasilyevka and towards another Bilogorovka in the middle of this map. So this is another place where the Russians are planning to cut this cross. You see that there is a small cross of a regular road and a railroad, and they want to also to establish control over this town, and by doing that there will be an open way towards Lysychansk oil refinery. But I'm not sure about when exactly Russians planning to do all these further movements. For now, let's concentrate on more local, like taking control and establishing cauldron in Svetlodarsk and Zolotoye area. More news are coming from Tashkovka. The Russians, they're trying to get towards Chekhirovo, but as far as I understand, they haven't taken Tashkovka yet. This area, this town, still in the gray zone. As far as we can understand why. If you take a look at this map, you're gonna see one important thing: it's trenches. It's a very powerful trenches, and this is the thing that we can see just on the maps. But I'm sure that these trenches, they started somewhere here, and they're moving from the territory that under the Russian control towards this area. So it's like entire trenches, and of course it's very difficult for the Russians to push Ukrainians from this land. So we'll see what's next. But I must say that the cauldron is almost ready, at least if we are talking about Zolotoye Girsky area. Don't forget that the Russians established control over the town Rekhovo, and it's also a very nice possibility to at least support the Russians that attacks towards Rubivka and towards the west part of Kamyshevacha, and for the people who are working with in Tashkovka. So this is a very nice fire position, and using this and having this position under the Russian controls allow them to suppress the Ukrainians in this area, to freeze them and not to allow them to be dynamic, to be flexible in this area. More news we have from the Liman area. The Russians also activated in this area. This evening I got the news that they started their assault operations toward Yarova. If you remember, they established control over the Drobyshevo. The Russians established control over the Drobyshevo. They cut it Liman from the big land. There is no way to cross this area just like on your feet through the river without heavy equipment or heavy armor. Now the Russians started their storm operations toward Yarova, and there is one important update. I was waiting for this update for a very long time. If you see the West Sources map, they updated their map, and now they're showing that the Russians established control over this forest and over these two small places. We discussed many times about the wedge that the Russians are trying to create in this area. That was the original plan, we might say, and by taking Dovginke and by taking these two small forests, the Russians achieved possibility to split these two forests. And after that, as soon as they established control over the north part of this area, from northeast area from Dovginke, they had possibility, and they did that. They cleared this forest with their commandos. There were very heavy clashes in this forest because before this forest was under the Ukrainians. Of course, they prepared themselves, but the Russian commandos, they did their job well, and they pushed Ukrainians from this area towards Bogorodichne. So we can say that the Russians are here. If you remember, we discussed that their main idea on the first stage to establish something like this, to take control and to prepare their forces in this area. After that, they are planning to attack Slavyansk from the north. So for now, their main idea to attack Bogorodichne. And if they are able to do this, that means that Svetogorsk forces will appear in another encirclement, another cauldron. Of course, the thing that I'm telling you right now, it's everything you're hearing is about and according to the Russian sources map. We know that, for example, Ukrainians, they have another point of view about this situation. The West sources, they're also saying that Ukrainians are winning or something like this. So that's why you need to understand, and you need to decide for yourself who is lying, who is telling the truth. I'm just trying to give you the point of view of the Russians from their channels, military channels, and so on, and just to understand what is going to be next. More updates, more news we have in Kharkiv area, and these news are not very good for the Ukrainians as well. According to the Russian sources, they managed to encircle a small group of Ukrainians in this area. This map is not updated, but according to the Russian sources, they managed to return control over the town Ternova. And the Russians managed to return control over the town Rubizhne. These two towns. And the main idea of these two operations was that some Ukrainian forces in this area moved further to the north, from Rubizhne towards Grafsky, Staritsa. We discussed that the Ukrainians were planning to send in this direction their commanders, and the main idea was to blow a bridge to cut the supply road. I'm not sure about the quantity of the forces in this forest, but the Russians announced that they managed to encircle them, and maybe like a few hundreds or something like this, but it's also not a very good news for the Ukrainians. And as we discussed yesterday, the Ukrainians, they're preparing their front line on the line from Zolochiv towards Stary Saltov. So they want to stop Russians on this line. So we'll see what's next in this area. Now let's move to the Avdiivka operation. As you see, we can say that it's also a flower, but it's a very small flower, and this flower hasn't bloomed yet. But we see that the Russians are also moving towards at least 3 directions in this area. They are trying to encircle Avdiivka, and we see this like on the map. It's like West Sources map. They're moving towards New York. According to the West Sources map, you see that they just get the suburbs, but according to the Russians, they have already established control over a few blocks in the New York. And also Russians are moving towards Alexandropol, and after Alexandropol they're trying to move to the north. So we see that situation for the Ukrainians is really bad. And to tell the truth, if you asked me yesterday what my opinion about the Severodonetsk group, I would say that the best solution for at least Severodonetsk, at least for the group that located on that side of the river, to cross this river and to enforce the Ukrainian forces on this side of the river, because it's for the Russians it is very difficult to storm and take control over Severodonetsk, but it would be much more harder for the Russians to cross this river. I don't know what the Ukrainians are planning to do, but more and more people, more and more military analytics says that if yesterday the Ukrainians had possibility to leave this area, to retreat toward more reliable positions, and more reliable positions in this area is Seversk, Bakhmut, Konstantinovka. So it's a very nice position. There is rivers, there is towns, and they're very fortified towards these positions. But starting this morning, the Ukrainians from Lysychansk liberation, as I see, they don't have any possibility to leave this area. We can say that from now on they are in operational tactical encirclement. That means that these guys still have possibility to leave this territory, but with small groups, using the fields and so on. More news about Azovstal. By this morning of local time, there were around 2,000 of soldiers that surrendered. Some of them were transferred towards Donetsk, some of them were transferred towards Russian Federation. But people are asking what is the purpose of these actions, and people always have this one question: are the Russians planning to change these forces or something like this? I must say that I have one opinion about this situation. First of all, we saw that most of these soldiers, most of these guys from Azov were transferred toward Donetsk, and just the most important were transferred toward the Russian Federation. That means that the question of exchanging of those soldiers would be under the Donetsk People Republic power. And this is the main idea. I think that these guys will be exchanged, Russians for these people, maybe not now, maybe later, maybe by the end of this war or something like this. But the main idea to force the Ukrainian authority to start their negotiation process with the Donetsk People Republic's authorities. The Russians want to force Ukrainians to liberate these two republics. They want to force them to sit on the same table. And if they are doing this, that means that we can say about some recognizing of these republics in the world. So this is the main idea. It's my opinion. And that's it for today. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel. Put your likes. And enjoy your weekend. Bye bye.